Hi my friends, my name is Francis. I use they them pronouns and I'm glad you're here. Today I'm going to be talking about my life experience as a non-binary lesbian starting from the year 2000 until the year 2001. Oh, that's not accurate. From the year 2000 to the year 2021. Right off the bat, I'd just like to say that I've noticed a lot of people throughout my life or on the internet or in my friends' lives, etc., etc. They have this belief that trans is a new thing, or that the people who identify themselves as non-binary or as a gender other than the one they were assigned at birth, that they're like jumping onto some sort of trend. And I know that the word trans-trender has been around, and in my more ignorant years I use that to describe people. We're getting all the tea today. I'm gonna briefly even talk about my anti-feminist phase, because that was a thing. Yay! A lot of people seem to be under this illusion that trans people are a new thing, or that the people who are identifying themselves as trans nowadays never experienced gender confusion as a kid and are just jumping on a trend. Some non-binary people do identify as non-binary, not because of any sort of dysphoria or discomfort, and don't identify themselves as trans, can still identify as non-binary and be entirely valid no matter what their experiences was growing up and all that stuff. I'm just here to tell my story and say that trans people have existed since the dawn of time, and yeah, anyway, we're getting into it now. I usually really don't like telling the internet what my gender was I was assigned at birth, but for the purposes of telling my story, it is kind of needed for the world to know, I guess, just because it makes more sense. I'm not talking as vaguely. It's funny though, because a lot of people were like, you are definitely assigned male at birth. I can tell. I have a perfect radar for these things. And I'm like, do you? And they're like, yeah, you can't trick me. You were assigned male at birth. I can tell because this, and this. And I'm like, if you say so, but you're wrong. To the point where, like, if I tell them what my gender I was assigned at birth, they literally don't believe me. It's really funny. But anyway, I was assigned female at birth and was raised up as a little girl. When I was little, I didn't really have many playing fields to interact with my gender, so I don't have a whole lot of clear memories, but the ones that I do have are definitely there. I've had people in my life dispute this and be like, you're not non-binary. When you were little, you were so feminine. And the thing is that yes, I was feminine when I was little, but I was also very masculine because I'm non-binary. I'm not a trans man, or at least I don't currently identify as one. I'm not one to the best of my knowledge. So like, pointing out that I was feminine as a little girl doesn't really undo everything else I experienced. And anyway, you can be feminine or masculine or neither or both and still be non-binary, still be any gender, honestly. Like, trans men don't owe you masculinity, trans women don't owe you femininity, and non-binary people don't owe you androgyny. That's just the facts of the situation. Because of all that, I don't really have clear memories of like, yes, this was a time when I felt very feminine, because it didn't really stand out to me because I was socialized and raised up as a little girl. So when I had these feminine feelings, I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to have. But when I had more masculine experiences and feelings, they took a bigger slice of my brain. So I'm mainly going to be sharing times when I had a masculine experience that didn't relate to my gender I was socialized as, and so I was like, clear disconnect. That's just a forward. When I was a toddler, I dressed pretty masculinely. A lot of people thought I was a little boy, which made my mom upset. In my opinion, I was raised pretty much gender neutral, which, people might have their own opinions on that in my family, but that is how I see it. It was never really enforced on me, gender roles or anything like that. Like, if I wanted a Wolverine action figure, I got a Wolverine action figure until my dog destroyed it. The farthest back I can remember of feeling out of place and wrong for my gender experiences is the first birthday party I ever went to, because there was a bunch of little girls there and I was having a great time. I was homeschooled though, so I didn't really ever have an experience to interact with kids of my same gender or of the opposite gender. I didn't really interact with kids that much at all. The first birthday party that I went to, it was very feminine. And that was the first clear disconnect I had, I was like, I'm nothing like these girls. I'm nothing like these girls at all. Who am I? And that was when I was like 5 or 6 or something. I don't know. But it was just like a weird disconnect where I'm like, I'm not like these girls. Is there something wrong with me? In general, gender didn't really play a huge part in my life. I loved superheroes. I loved play fighting. I loved playing video games, all these things that like aren't inherently gendered because nothing is inherently gendered. But it was just these, like I grew up enjoying things that like little boys like. And once I realized that that wasn't the experience that other little girls were having, I felt out of place and like something was wrong with me. And then at some point I kind of leaned into it and I had like a war on dresses, at least in my head. I don't remember if I externalized it, but I know that I was like, I don't want her to wear dresses. I want to dress like a little boy. At some point in my life I wanted to be a little boy, but I don't know if I verbalized that at all. I don't really remember what all I did outwardly, but I remember what I felt inwardly, if that makes sense. So I remember at some point I just was like, I'm going to start dressing masculinely. And then I remember a very clear memory. It was like my gender awakening, I think. But it was when I was little, like maybe 8, 7. I don't know how old I was actually, but I was between the ages of 5 and 10. That's all I know. I was in my relative's house and she like pulled me aside. We were in the hallway and she said that I was ugly and that I needed to dress femininely and dress like a little girl. And I was like, why do I need to dress like a little girl? And she said, because you are a little girl. And that was the first moment that I was like, okay, clearly we're not operating on the same plane of existence here because I'm not a little girl. That was the first time that I remember being like, what? And obviously no matter what the gender, I don't believe that anyone should treat a kid like that. If I was a little girl, that would have been a pretty ratchet thing for that person to say to me anyway. But because I wasn't a little girl, I had a very clear gender disconnect about that. Eventually, I think someone called me a tomboy at some point in my life. And so then I was like, yeah, no, that sounds more fitting. And so I was identifying as a tomboy. And it was always like kind of in my head where I was like, I'm a tomboy. I'm not a girl, I'm a tomboy. And then someone called me a little girl and I was like, I'm not a little girl, I'm a tomboy. And they're like, a tomboy is still a girl. And that like shattered me. I was like, oh God, I don't know who I am then. At this point, is sort of when sexuality became intertwined in my life because I had this little friend who was a boy, and so everyone told me I had a crush on him. So I was like, I guess I have a crush on him. But in reality, he was just my friend. I have memories of him too where like I would challenge his masculinity and be like, I'm more of a boy than you are, and he would get really mad at me and we would like chase each other across the trailer park. I remember very clearly because he was very much stronger than me because he was like a football player and stuff. But I remember clearly this one time I like challenged him to an arm wrestling fight and then I lost immediately, and I immediately challenged him to a race and then I lost, and then I immediately challenged him to something else and I lost, and I was like, whatever, I'm still more tough and boyish than you are. And he was like, no, you're not, what are you talking about? And I was like, shut up and play Matchbox cars with me. Then we played Matchbox cars and I would go to my friend's house, another friend, every day after school, and him and I would play like Guess Who, and like we would play with our action figures and stuff, and it was just great. Oh man, yeah, that kid who was my neighbor, I can't even remember exactly what he said, but there was a day where we were hanging out and I felt like really great hanging out with this kid. And then he said something that very clearly made it evident to me that he saw himself as a little boy and me as a little girl. And I was like, oh, oops, I thought you understood. I think I started hanging out with him less after that time, which is sad. I had all these friends. My best friend at the time, her little brother, every time I hung out with him, I felt really great because we'd like play Matchbox cars or like action figures, and our people would beat each other up, and then I'd play with little girls and we would just be like, hi Barbie. And like I hated it. At that point I think I felt like a little boy because I didn't really think that there was anything else to be. But I didn't know how to verbalize that because I felt like that was just so stupid of me. I think I liked hanging out with little boys because I could be masculine and feminine at the same time, and they didn't really question it. Like little girls, my masculinity stood out very strongly, and so they would sort of point it out or call me weird and address it and be like, why are you like this? But little boys, I think they expected me to be feminine to begin with, but they wanted to do masculine things. And so I could have like this balance and just feel really great. Like I felt very much like me hanging out with little boys because it fit really well together. I could be both things that I am. Once sexuality started like making an appearance in my life, I kind of confused things. Now looking back on it, I realized that I confused things. I remember there was times, I think a great example is Total Drama Island, which now looking back on it, I had a camper point out to me that Duncan from Total Drama Island is kind of a misogynist, which I didn't realize when I was little, but now I see their point and it's very valid. No, with Total Drama Island, Duncan and Gwen were like my babes. Like I was like, oh my heart. And I had myself convinced that I wanted to be like Gwen. They say, looking a lot like Gwen. I was like, oh, I want to be Gwen. But no, I didn't. I didn't want to be Gwen. I wanted to date Gwen. And I wanted to be Duncan, but I convinced myself I wanted to date Duncan, which it was all weird. Going back to Wolverine and Rogue, I was like, oh my gosh, I would be such a cute couple with Wolverine. But when I thought about it, I didn't want to date him. I just wanted to like beat stuff up with him. With Rogue, like I thought she was just super pretty, and but I was like, oh yeah, I want to be Rogue, but I thought she was super pretty. Same with Jubilee in that same show. I was like, oh my god, Jubilee, and I wanted to be Nightcrawler. It was just this weird thing where like I would see guys and be like, oh, I really like them, I must have a crush on them. And then I would have a crush on girls and be like, oh, I really like them, I must want to be like them. It was all sorts of weird. But I didn't know how to put that into words for a long time. And I remember being at Girl Scout camp once, and it was like this special event where they let little boys into the camp. And I was hanging out with this friend that I had who was a little boy, and I was like playing in the dirt or something, just doing weird stuff like that. I was like building rock towers and smashing them and just being this little tomboy, you know. And my guy friend like looked at my mom and goes, are you sure that your kid is a girl? And I was like, like it was like just this moment of absolute power. I felt so great. I was like, I'm not sure that I'm a girl, so I'm so glad you asked. But then as I started to get older and more closer to puberty, I started to get more and more upset about what I was. How I was being, I was being perceived. I was becoming in denial, and people were questioning me more about what boys I liked. I remember being sat down and someone asked me, like, do you have a crush on any boys? And I was like, the first thing I could think of was Joe Jonas. So I was like, yeah, I have a crush on Joe Jonas. And I totally had a crush on Selena Gomez because Selena Gomez, oh my god. But yeah, I was like, yeah, I totally have a crush on Joe Jonas. And then that sort of like, I think was honestly the starting point of a lot of me just looking at random guys and declaring I had a crush on them. That's the first time that I verbalized or thought that a thing, but that's very true. I just started looking at guys and being like, I have a crush on them. And it's caused me a lot of interesting experiences. I would watch Wizards of Waverly Place all the time. I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. It was my favorite show, and I wanted everything to do with Selena Gomez. And I convinced myself that I had a crush on David Henry, but looking back on it, like I didn't have any sort of crush feelings towards David Henry. For one, I'm a lesbian, but also looking back on it, I'm like, I didn't want to date David Henry. I wanted to be an older brother. Like I was living as an older sister, but I wanted to be an older brother. And the more I tell this story, it makes me sound like I'm a trans guy, but I'm not. It's just that I know of. It's just that I gravitated towards boy because it was closer than girl. And to this day, it's being a boy is closer to me than being a girl. As puberty approached, I was in denial. I was terrified. I had like these weird experiences with it. I was convinced that I would not grow boobs, and someone in my family told me that genetically I would grow big boobs, which for one, it's just a creepy thing to say to a kid, but for 2 made me very uncomfortable, and I was like, I don't want them. But I felt like I should want them because, you know, boys like boobs or whatever. So I was like, oh, I need to change my mindset about these things. So then I got convinced myself I was really excited to have boobs. And I was like, yeah, like, I'm gonna have big boobs and stuff like this. And I was like, yeah, let's go. In reality, I did not want boobs at all. Or if I did, I wanted them to not be big. To this day, that's like my main dysphoria that I experience still. So yeah, that didn't change at all. I was also in denial, and I was convinced I would never shave, and then eventually I kind of got pressured into shaving, and then I would purposely forget it like all the time. I would be like, oh, look at that, I haven't shaved in 2 months, imagine that. And then people would like bully me or something, so I would shave my legs, and you know, it was all that sort of stuff. Speaking of shaving legs, I also had a lot of dysphoria about shaving until I eventually just stopped shaving, and now I feel a lot better about myself. I was also convinced I would never get my period because, you know, girls get periods and I'm not a girl. So I was absolutely convinced that I wouldn't get a period, and that again is a big dysphoria I have to this day. This is silly. I always wanted sideburns. Like I thought for sure I would grow sideburns. Like I was like, yep, I can't wait for the day that I get sideburns. Somebody told me that girls grow facial hair sometimes, so it's something I gotta watch out for. So I was like, do I got it? Do I got it? Do I got it? No, I don't. The next clear experience I can remember about being like, that's not me, is my grandparents brought me church shopping, which is just to say we were looking for a new church to go to in a new neighborhood, and they brought me to this one church where I went into the kids' place, and it was great. I was having a good time until the teacher said boys on this side of the room and girls on this side of the room. And I mean, I think that's a very stereotypical non-binary meme at this point, but I was just like, say what? It was the first time that I'd been specifically sectioned off because of my gender I was assigned at birth. And I sort of stood around for a bit and I was like, I don't know what to do here. And they're like, go over to the girl side. And I was like, I don't want to. Can I go over to the boy side? And they were like, no. And I was like, really? For real? And they're like, yeah, no. And I was like, I want to be over there. And they're like, no. And so I went over to the girl side and they were just like, oh my gosh, ladies. And I was just like, I hate this. I hate everything about existing right now. Get me out of here. And my grandparents picked me up and they're like, how was service? And I was like, I never want to come back here again. So we didn't. We never went back there. That was just a very clear memory for me though. Like, it made me so mad that I remember it to this day, and I talk about it quite a bit because it was a very clear like gender experience where I'm like, things aren't as they are supposed to be right now. And then we moved and I was getting older and I started middle school and I was being bullied for my masculine features. It was so weird. Like, I wasn't ever bullied before, really. So it was like this new experience for me, and these things that I really liked about myself, now I was being bullied for. Like, people were like, yo, you sound like a boy, like you look like a boy, you're tall like a boy, you know, have a deep voice like a boy, and you have like this chiseled chin like a boy, and just like really just being mean to me, you know, like kids do. And I was like, are these bad things? Should I not want to be like a boy? And it really just sent me down this spiral of confusion and like, I don't know what's happening. And then I started proudly being a girl. I was like, yeah, no, I'm a girl. I'm not a boy. I'm a girl. And I was just totally lying to myself about like the same thing with growing boobs, where I'm like, yeah, this is a thing that I'm supposed to be, so I'm gonna be it. And it was really bad for me. And then, oh my gosh. So around that time too, I had this best friend who was super abusive to me and terrible, right? And they came out to me as non-binary. Well, they said I think I might be non-binary. I don't know what they ever landed on. They were gender confused for most of our relationship. And now I don't talk to them. But they at that point were like, I think I'm non-binary. I was like, you're what? And they told me what non-binary was, and I was like, that's a thing? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Love that. Wow. And I didn't know what to do, especially because this person was abusive and I didn't want anything to do with them. I didn't want to be like them. And they were the only non-binary person I ever met, but I was just like, oh my god. Oh no. It's right in my face. Oh no, my gender, it's broken. I just shoved that deep inside me and pretended that I never heard that word. Then I just continued on with my life like nothing happened. But I, from that moment, knew I was non-binary. Like, I knew that that was the term that was me when I was, 13, 12? Yeah, so ever since I was 12, I knew that non-binary was a thing. And I knew that it was me. But I was like, no, it's not, no, it's not, no, it's not. No. Middle school. So I just continued on with my life and had more weird crush relationships. I was very insecure about the fact that I'm gay. So I just shoved that stuff as deep down inside me as I could. I'm like, I'm not gay. Also, the abusive friend. I was afraid that like if I was gay, that it excused all the bull that they put me through. And so I was like, I'm not gay. I was also afraid that if I was gay, it was because of what they did to me. Yeah, no, it was just a bull crap time all around. I was having a rough time. So then I started feeling like I constantly had to have a crush to defend myself. So like I always had a crush, and as soon as I got over one crush, I immediately thought of another crush. And at the time I didn't know what was happening, and it was to where like if I had a crush on a guy and then he started showing any signs of interest towards me at all, I booked it. I like ran for the hills. I was like, oh no, I can't hurt you. But so I just ran from it. And I told myself it was because of the trauma. But I was like, no, I can't do this. I just always had to have the next crush. Meanwhile, I had actual crushes on girls, and I was very confused about it because they were girls. And I was like, I don't have crushes on girls. I'm straight. And so I was like, would just avoid them with everything I had. If I had even a slightest crush on a girl, I would like wouldn't talk to them. I would just pretend that they didn't exist. To the point that I don't even remember who I had crushes on in 7th and 8th grade. I just remember that I would see a girl and think that she was pretty, so I would just avoid her like the plague until I forgot about her. That was the time. Even like my friends had friends who I thought were really cute, and so I just like avoided them and I tried to never think about them. And then I started developing this weird thing where I'd have crushes on like the most undesirable guys. I mean like the guys who I was convinced were gonna like hurt me or kill me or whatever. And I would be like, oh yeah, I have such a huge crush on them. And I don't know why I did that, but I think it was just self-hatred, honestly. Like nothing wrong with anything that they looked like or their personality. It was just that they were like gonna kill me, and I'm pretty sure one of them that I had a crush on ended up bringing a knife to school and like actually hurting people. So yeah, that was a weird time in my life where I had crushes on bad people, and I don't know why I did that. Also, the entire time that I was having this weird middle school like running from girls, have crushes on bad people, I was also like falling in love with my friend who was a girl. I was just ignoring it. I was like, no, it's not happening. Nothing is happening in this situation. I'm not in love with this person. I think that eventually I started also having crushes on guys who like no one else had a crush on for various reasons. Maybe they were terrible at hygiene, or maybe they just said things that you shouldn't say. So I started having crushes on these guys, and there was like no purpose to it. I think that what I had going on in my head was that I was like, I'm not attracted to any men, so if I'm just choosing random men to be attracted to, might as well be attracted to the men that no one else is attracted to, because then they'll have someone be attracted to them and then they'll feel better. I don't know, something like that. But then, you know, every time that they showed any sign of interest to me at all, I would book it, run for the hills, run away. Around that same time, I started getting like weirdly specific, tangible dysphoria that I didn't think was dysphoria, you know, because I didn't think I wasn't non-binary, and I didn't even know that that term existed. But like, I remember just my hair wasn't ever right. Like, it just felt weird. It felt like a mask. Like, it just, every time I looked at my hair or tried to do anything with my hair, I was like, it felt like this weird representation of all of my gender confusion. It was always too short or too long or too feminine or too masculine. Like, it never was right. It was always wrong. and I couldn't figure it out because I always felt uncomfortable. Like, my hair and my clothing could never be good. Like, I always felt so uncomfortable in them because they were either too masculine or too feminine or just bad. Like, I just hated it so much. It's funny because at first I didn't realize what I was doing, but then I started wearing baggy clothes, which is another classic trans meme. But I didn't want the world to know I had boobs. But I also did want the world to know I had boobs. I had this really weird experience with it where I would hide them, but I would also wear bras that made them look bigger, but then I would hide them even more, and I was just confused and hated everything. Wore borgy. Wore baggy shirts, but wore baggy clothes all the time. Wore jeans because I hated my legs because they were either hairy and I felt self-conscious about them, or they were shaved and I felt dysphoric about them. I was just having an experience all around. And then I remember, like, I was at church and I was dressing masculine and I actually felt really great about myself, and this little girl ran up to me and she goes, are you a boy or are you a girl? And I was like, and I just ran away. Like, I was like, I'm a girl. And then I just booked it. I just ran from this child and I sat on the bathroom floor and was like, oh my God. I like panic attack about this question that I was asked because it confronted something that I wasn't ready to confront. Yeah. Then high school came around and I was more focused on getting away from my abusive friend than anything else, so nothing really was happening gender-wise for the first beginning. And then I became so against the idea that I was gay. Like, I was fine if anyone else is gay, but I was so against it. The thought of it just triggered so many things in me. Like, even thinking about it now, I'm like, bad. And yeah, so if I had a crush on a girl, I called it a friendship crush, which is really funny to me. At this point, I actually start remembering having actual tangible crushes on girls. And then the following year, my friend came out as a trans girl, and I was once again faced with the reality of my own gender, and I did not know what to do about it. I was very supportive of her, and I had so many questions, but I was terrified to ask her anything about non-binary because I knew she'd see right through me and know what I was. I didn't want to just be like, so what's non-binary? No reason. I would ask her so many questions. I learned all about like dysphoria and dead names and misgendering, and I was like, wow, look at me, I got this whole wealth of knowledge about trans people in my brain for no reason. There's nothing I need to know about this. I'm fine. And like, every time I came across a trans celebrity, I was like in love with them, and I was like, you're so cool. But I told myself it was just because I wanted to support my trans friend, but in reality, like, it was just me experiencing gender stuff. And then my trans friend's friend came out as non-binary, and they were the second non-binary person I'd ever met, and I did not like them. And so I was like, this sucks. I just want to meet a non-binary person who I like. It's just so hard. But then that gave me an option to ask my friend about her non-binary friend and get all of the information I can. And when I was asking her about them, I was like, I don't even know. I can't even do an impression, but I tried my hardest to sound cisgender. Like, I was trying to sound so confused and like, so is it like that in between space when you're not awake but you're not asleep? And like, I was just being stupid, trying to hide myself from her, even though she's like the most supportive person in my life. I was trying to hide myself from her. It's so stupid to think back on myself, like, child, what were you doing? Then my dysphoria started getting a lot more specific. I hated shaving with a passion, and so I wore pants all the time so I didn't have to shave, and I would go like forever without shaving, and I dreaded summer coming along. I stopped swimming eventually because if I didn't swim, I didn't have to wear anything but pants. And if I didn't have to wear anything but pants, if I just wore pants, then I didn't have to shave. And so yeah, and then I would wear baggy shirts so that I didn't have to shave my armpits, and I would just hide my body so that I didn't have to shave it. and it gave me a lot of dysphoria, but I didn't know that because I didn't know I was non-binary. And I hated auditioning in theater. Like, I love the theater, but every time I would like grab my audition paper and look for the female names, and every time it just made me feel like vomiting. Like, I wanted to audition for the boy roles, but I was like, I can't audition for the boy roles, I'm not a boy. And it made me so sad. And so I auditioned for every gender androgynous character that I could, but it wasn't like a whole lot. But I was always like, oh my gosh, please. Oh my gosh, yeah. Going way back to 6th grade, the first play I ever auditioned for, I wanted to be the snowman. The casting director for the 6th grade play was like, you and then my best friend. We only have 2 girl roles, and it's Clarice and Mrs. Claus. And I was like, can I be the snowman? And they're like, no. And I'm like, please. And they're like, you either get to be Clarice or Mrs. Claus, and we're gonna make you Mrs. Claus because you're not very feminine. And then they gave the role of Clarice to my best friend. Oh my gosh, it was really funny. I don't even know if she remembers that. But yeah, so they gave my best friend the role of Clarice. This is my current best friend, by the way, not my toxic best friends of the past, but my current best friend. But yeah, they gave her Clarice and they gave me Mrs. Claus because I had a deep voice and was tall, and they didn't want me to be the love interest of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer because I had a deeper voice than Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Yeah, so when I was auditioning though, like, I was so aware of my voice and I felt so gross about it, and I tried to sing like feminine, like la 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 la, and I hated it, and I couldn't do it, and I felt so gross, and I just hated it. I hated singing so much. Whenever we would work on things, the voice director would sort of break us up into groups, and I was always on the lower end because I have a deeper voice, and I was like insecure about it because I was like, but that's where all the boys are, and I don't want to confront my gender right now, okay? And around that time, I also got dysphoric in the fact that she, her pronouns made me very uncomfortable. But I wasn't a he, him. I wasn't going to use he, him pronouns, and I thought they, them pronouns were weird. Not because they were weird, but because I was not ready to confront them. And so I would just suffer. I would just lived as a girl and was called she, her pronouns and felt dysphoric about it, but I just avoided it all. Nope, not me. And then at the end of 10th grade, I knew I was non-binary, and I was like, I gotta face it. And so I came out to my best friend at the time, who is not my abusive best friend and is not my current best friend, but was my best friend at the time. I came out to her as non-binary, and she just kind of looked at me like, and then she said something invalidating. I don't remember what it was, but I think it was like, everybody likes masculine and feminine things. I don't even know what it was, but it hurt me, and so I shoved myself back into the closet. And then non-binary started becoming a thing that people talked about more, and so like that same week that I came out to her as non-binary, I went to church, and my friends were just talking trash about non-binary, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is not the time to come out. I'm not non-binary. I'm gonna shove that deep inside. And that's about when the time I also went into my anti-feminist phase and started watching Blair White. And I don't know if you know who Blair White is. She's bad, but I just dove headfirst into like non-binary is bad, and so it was really bad for me. Blair White was just trashing on non-binary people all the time, and even though I'd shoved myself so deep into the closet, I'd known I was non-binary for like 3 years at this point, and so it felt sad. It felt sad hearing this person, because at this point I really looked up to Blair White, and I felt like really bad that she didn't like me, and I always hoped, I hoped so hard that she would someday come out and change her mind and be like, just kidding, non-binary people are valid. That was like all I wanted to hear. It's just super weird to look back on it now, because I'm like, why did I care so much about Blair White's opinion of my gender? But it really messed me up continuously for a long time. And that was also around the time that I went to church and they gave an anti-gay people sermon. And then some people at that church found a video of this ex-lesbian who was just like this lesbian who decided to marry a man and live with a man even though she knew she was a lesbian. And so everyone was talking about how heroic and beautiful and wonderful this woman was for fighting her for fighting her homosexual urges. And I was like, okay, cool, this is fine. I just shook the entire camera. But I was like, it's fine, everything's fine. But yeah, it was hurting me. And then I went to church camp. This is going into my senior year, and I had a Jesus high. You know, I don't know if you've ever heard that word, but it's like, you know, you're in there and you're like, and then you come out of it and you're like, oh, I am so Christian, all that stuff. I had a Jesus high. And then I was like, I'm gonna make the active decision to be a heterosexual cisgender woman. And so then I started shaving and showing my legs and, you know, not wearing baggy clothes and all this stuff. Like, I was just betraying myself, honestly. I started looking for more suitable man crushes, and so I like started actually being attracted to reasonable men who weren't just scary and gross. I tried to learn how to do my hair. I tried to learn how to do my makeup. I tried to just look feminine and be feminine. I just started to dress feminine. And I went to this church college and I was like, yes, feminine. But then, you know, as it does, dysphoria hit me and I was like, I can't run away from this. It lasted about a year. It lasted about a year of me trying to pretend that this wasn't me. And all of a sudden, I was having panic attacks every time I went to shave. And it would take me hours and I would just be sitting on the bathroom floor of my college crying because I was shaving. I started going by Ash instead of my birth name because my birth name was giving me extreme dysphoria all of a sudden, which was not fun. For a long time I didn't care about my birth name, and then all of a sudden it was just very dysphoric for me to hear it. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I would physically cringe every time someone called me. I was like afraid to go back to my family because they would call me by my birth name instead of Ash. And every time they did call me Ash, I was like, oh, thank goodness. It was just a bad experience. Having a time. I was having a time. But I otherwise lived super femininely in every way I could, and I dressed like hyper feminine. It was like in a weird alternative way, but I dressed really feminine and I just felt very uncomfortable with myself. And then my college got my major, which is what my last video was about, and all of a sudden everything fell apart in front of me and I was like, wait a second. Why am I doing this? Why am I lying to myself? Why am I this fake person? But I still hid from it. I ran from it. I was like, nope, it's not me. And I ended up getting my first partner, who was a boy. If you're watching this, I don't mean you any ill will. You're super cool and I appreciate you a lot. First boyfriend person whose name I'm not gonna say. Once I had a boyfriend, like, it changed my perspective on a lot of things, and all of a sudden I wasn't able to hide from things like I was in the past. I wasn't able to hide from the fact that I was hairy and dysphoric about not being hairy. I wasn't able to hide from the fact that if he ever called me by my birth name, I felt like vomiting. And I wasn't able to hide from the fact that I was not attracted to men. I was dating a man and not attracted to men, and I felt like a terrible person about it because I was well aware of what was happening, but not consciously because I buried all that deep inside me. And I just felt like a bad person. I felt terrible. And I started to realize too that I could never be like the typical girlfriend for him, which he was okay with because he's a cool guy. I just started questioning things about myself a lot more in my face, like he liked calling me by my birth name because he thought it was pretty, and I was like, oh, I can't handle this. I can't handle this. And I didn't know I was feeling dysphoria, but I knew that it wasn't good. And I was like, that was when I started realizing that if I ever dated a guy and he wanted me to shave, I might have to break up with him because I couldn't put myself through that. It was just bad. It was a bad time. And then at some point, him and I were joking around. I don't even remember what about. And then he called me his girlfriend, and I had like a visceral reaction to the word girlfriend, and I was like, ugh. I had a lot of dysphoria about it. And he was like confused. And then we kind of were just joking it off. And then he was like, well, I sure hope you're a girl. And that, I think, was the moment. That was another moment that I think that was the moment that I was like, I can't keep hiding from this. That was like, we're here. We found it. This is who we are, and we cannot hide from it. It's right in our face. I still hid from it, but not internally, just externally. I didn't come out, but I knew who I was after that moment, because I was like, no, I'm not a girl, though. That's the problem. Then, around our 1-year anniversary, I broke up with him and told him I needed to think about some things. I told him I needed to figure some stuff out. And I felt bad, and he was confused. He was like, what do you need to figure out? Like, you're like the most confident person I know. And I'm like, yeah, but things are not right. Things are not good up in here. I don't know who I am. And so then I broke up with him, and I sort of like, I don't even know. I spent a lot of time really focusing on myself, but focusing on myself and everything other than my gender and sexuality, which were the two things I really needed to focus on. And then that summer, I was hanging out with my friend, and they brought me to visit their friends, and they told me in the car, they were like, hey, I just want you to know that my friends are non-binary. They both use they, them pronouns, and I wasn't sure if you had experience with those, but I would hate for them to feel uncomfortable or for you to feel uncomfortable, that sort of thing. And I was like, And in that moment, I made an unconscious decision and just blurted out, I think I'm non-binary. And they were the first person I ever came out to, and it was very well received. They were very sweet, and they told me basically that a lot of people would support me and that it would be really good and that everything was fine. They were just really great about it. And so that was sort of like a, oh, okay, cool moment for me. Then the following semester started at school, and I was accepting of myself as non-binary at that point. And it felt really cool, but also so scary. And I came out to my roommates, and they were super supportive, and they were like, this isn't your Christian Bible college anymore. Like, this is a state college. People are not going to be mean to you. You can come out. There's plenty of non-binary people here. Like, it's going to be okay. You're okay. And so then I started putting she, they as my pronouns. Like in Zoom, it would be like, Ash, she, they. Everyone would still call me she. But once I was working on a project with these people, and one of my classmates called me they. Like, they referred to me as they. Like, they're like, oh yeah, they were working on that slide. And I was like, oh boy. And all of that pain that I'd felt for so long, I felt just different about. Like, it was okay now, it felt unreal. And so I was like, oh geez, okay, cool. And then I put my pronouns as they, she after that very day. I wanted to just full send make them they, them, but I didn't want to feel outwardly disrespected if people kept calling me by she, her, which they did keep calling me by she, her. And so I started putting, like, I prefer they, them pronouns, but she, her is okay too. But people still called me by she, her, and I was like, out. And then I came out to my Snapchat, which is all of my friends who are like my same age. So it was scary. It was terrifying, actually. I don't remember. I think I put she, they on there too because I was like afraid. I was afraid of everything. I was just so scared. It was really well received. And so then I just started living like as a non-binary person and posting about it and experiencing it. But I was like terrified of binary trans people. Like terrified to tell them that I was non-binary because I was afraid that they would have the same opinion that Blair White had. And I really was not in a place where I was stable enough in my own identity to have people who I looked up to tell me I was wrong. Like, because, I look up to all trans people. Trans people are super cool. And so I was really scared that a trans person would tell me I was, like, invalidating or, bad representation for the whole community, the whole movement. I was really scared of it. Then, as I just became more and more comfortable, I came out more and more, and all of a sudden, like, I was just living as a non-binary person. And I felt like I wasn't a freak, and I wasn't broken, and I wasn't just this weird person. I felt like, oh, there's a reason for everything I've been feeling. Like, everything's okay. I'm okay. It was really nice. And I moved into my friend's house, and she's called me by they them like consistently, to where I felt comfortable just coming out straight as using they them pronouns. And I told her I kind of wanted to try out the name Frankie, and so she started using the name Frankie for me, and I was like, that's really cool, that's my name now. I still didn't go by that name until recently, but that was the first time that I was like, yeah, no, this is really cool. And then I got cast in a Zoom play with like a whole bunch of trans people, and they were super cool. And so I was hanging out with trans people like on the weekly, and I just felt I found my people, you know, and that was such a great feeling inside. And I met some non-binary people who that I liked for one, and that also liked me, and we were able to like interact and have like this camaraderie. And I just felt super cool, and just like, I don't know, I just felt really great. I moved again. I came out to my work as non-binary, so then my coworkers were trying to respect my gender, which was cool because I'd never thought I would be that confident. And then I went to a summer camp, which I talk about all the time. I love that camp. And it was so queer. Like, the camp was so great. They were so accepting. There were so many queer people. A lot of my campers were queer and gender queer, and it was just super cool. And then people started calling me Frankie, and someone called me Francis, and some people even called me Frank. I had one kid who would call me Halloween because I was trying out that name. It was really beautiful, you know? My current situation isn't as beautiful. I get dead named and misgendered a lot. I hear a lot of hurtful things, but I know that I can go places and be accepted and loved, where I can live as I am, but I live in conservative land right now. Yeah, I guess my closing note is any trans person out there, or anyone who is hiding from their gender, like, it's okay. You're not alone. You're not weird, you're not broken, you're not anything that your brain is telling you that you are. You're beautiful and you're valid. And if you're not in a situation that's accepting right now, there's so many situations out there that you can find yourself in that are so beautiful and so worth it, so worth all the wait, and it's just, it can be really beautiful. Thank you for watching my video. Love you guys. Have a good day and drink water, eat vitamins, work out. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye. Hey, Jet P.